I'm doing a little bit of wood splitting today. I just finished doing a lot of cutting over here. You can see where the logs and stuff were. They're all cut up now. And those of you that, this is a first for my channel, I think. This is my 22-ton county line log splitter. It has a Kohler on it. I think it's a 5.5, 6.5, something like that. But she needs a bath right now. It's pretty dirty. A Kohler 3000 series, 6.5, 196 cc's. Actually, we're still running the original oils and stuff in this thing, so at some point I will change the oil in this thing. I also have this is like a tray for the side, and it is used for when you split the log, you can roll the other half of the log onto this thing here and split multiples of them. And I also have a 4-way. This is my 4-way wedge, and this thing's pretty nice to have. It definitely saves time for splitting and stuff. So, well, I guess let's fire this thing up and roll a log over, and then let's split some wood. Oh, and in case anyone doesn't know, this is my county line, or this is my 73 or 74 Sears Suburban. So let's start this thing up. We still have the price tags and stuff on this thing. Turn it to on. That's a good little motor. I can't really pick these logs up. They're too heavy.
I figured I would start out with a pretty naughty looking piece of wood. This thing has 2 branches coming off it, and generally the logs that have branches, big branches and stuff in them, they don't split really cleanly, and they're just not real great logs for a nice, neat firewood stacks. And what you guys see to the left every once in a while, those are some pallet, well, they're not pallet bins, but they are like IBC tote firewood bins that I've made with a roof. And I do have another video of those on my channel, in case you guys were wondering what those are or how I made them. But I'll tell you what, this county line log splitter, they have improved these a lot in the time period since I've had this one. I've had this one for a few years now, and it really doesn't get used really much at all. I might put 2 hours a year on it. But that'll all change when I finally get my own place, and I will probably heat that place with wood. I really like the wood heat. Nothing warms you up more than wood heat does. It just warms you to the bone, and as far as I'm concerned, wood heat is probably one of the best heats out there. But anyways, this is, like I said, this is just some ash wood. A lot of these logs in particular they weren't in the, like a freshly cut piece of wood. The tree had been dead for probably 3 or 4 years, and this wood it was just sitting up there in the tree, pretty much just drying as it is. And then Mother Nature took the tree down, or it just got weaker as time goes on. And I remember going out there or walking past it one day, and it wasn't there, and I thought, well, that's weird. So as it turns out, the other half of this tree let go, and I was gifted with a lot more firewood, and that's just the way things go, I guess. But I've learned pretty much every tree will usually gifts you with more wood than you think. You might look at a tree and say, oh, that's probably a 2-cord tree, and you get it down, cut it up, split it, and stack it, and pretty soon it's it's a 3 or 3.5 cord tree. So generally the trees give you, at least from my experience, more wood than at least we know what to do with. But you can see this log is really, there are some straight parts of it, but there's really not a whole lot. And with it being kind of an odd shape, it makes splitting this thing pretty difficult. I have to reposition the log a lot. And I know some people are probably thinking, you know, now that this thing's split in half, what you can do is flip this log splitter horizontal again and split standing up. I would do that, however, I have a lot more, I don't know, 4 more, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 more logs to split. And I just decided to split this, you know, standing up or bending over a little bit. It's not too bad. I probably would not want to do that. You know, splitting these logs bent over all day, that would not be fun. But like I said, you can see how, you know, kind of gnarly, and you know, these logs are just not straight. They're not a 90-degree angle, and they don't stack the greatest. But in these IBC tote bins, they stack wonderfully. The wood is really the one, I think, one of the best uses for an IBC tote, you know, other than what it was originally intended for. But I now have 3 of these, and I have probably about 2/3 of this one that I'm throwing the wood into filled now. I have another one that is totally filled up to the roof and then some, so the roofs on these are peaked, and what I've done is I've stacked the wood as pretty much as high up as I can get it and fit it inside of the IBC tote, because all that is up there is pretty much wasted space that you could fill it up with even more wood. So that's pretty much what I did. Now those IBC totes have they're probably 250 gallons, 200 to 300 gallons, something like that. And the product that they have in them is a liquid, and it is a lot. It's pretty heavy. You know, I forget what a gallon of water weighs. It's like, is it 8 pounds or 9 pounds or 7 pounds, something like that. And you know, 200 or 300 gallons at, say, 8 pounds per gallon. You know, do the math. You know, you probably have maybe approaching 2,000 pounds in this thing. And the firewood and stuff, it is pretty heavy. I'm not gonna lie. Each one of these logs that I put into here, I really couldn't pick up one of them. They're probably 15 inches in diameter, and I would have turned these logs into lumber, but this log here was pretty darn crooked, and it's just not, it would not have made a good lumber log. And I found the best way to move these rounds is to just roll them over to the splitter. I'm trying to keep the wood pile kind of somewhat condensed, and that's just how I want to try to do things. But I would love to someday get a nice skid steer to move this, you know, stuff around like this, move logs, and I think it would be a really a versatile machine to have rather than just cut them up for firewood. I've even seen people, they've put a firewood processor on the front of a skid steer, and they have forks and stuff on them too, so you can even pick up the piece of wood that you want to cut, and you can cut it right there, and heck, you could even have the log drop right onto the log splitter itself and split it right then and there. Now I know some people might be thinking that I'm splitting these logs kind of small, and you are kind of correct. I'm trying not to split these things super big. You know, for some people that, you know, it won't fit into their wood stove, and you can fit small pieces of wood into a big wood stove, but you can't fit big pieces of wood into a small wood stove. So splitting these pieces smaller is better, I think at least, for firewood and stuff. Now, there's been talk at my house about getting a wood burning stove, and I would really love to get a wood burning stove. That would be really nice to have, and I have plenty of firewood to spare here. Generally, I think the logs that are probably 10 inches and bigger I would probably use for lumber, and the logs that are 10 inches and under I would probably use for firewood. Maybe even 8 inches, but see, 8 inches is even still getting kind of small, and I know some people that would pretty much mill everything, mill as much wood that you can with what you have, whether it's small or big logs. But I definitely think around maybe 8 to 10 inches and up is what you want to mill for lumber. And it's really all in what you need for wood. Do you have more of a need for firewood to heat your home or your garage or whatever, or do you have more of a need for lumber? Say you're a woodworker, or I don't know, you're doing projects around here. I know around this place, you wouldn't believe the lumber and stuff that we could use for all sorts of things, from siding for the barn to bridge deck boards, beams, flooring for the barn, siding for the barn, etc., etc., woodworking projects and stuff. So wood is really a very useful commodity, I guess, and that's just the way things are. But you can see those IBC totes a little bit better now, and I've cut out the roof for them. And what's nice is these things have the sides that are open, and it allows a lot of air circulation, so the wood is less likely to mold and whatnot. And I may have mentioned this in a previous video, I think I did actually, but a neighbor actually gave me 3 of these totes, and I was pretty happy to get these things because I knew I would use them at some point, and here they are turned into firewood bins. And if I was to sell these logs, or sell this firewood, I would really like to get a forklift of some sort, and then I can just load the whole thing right up into someone's pickup truck or a trailer or something, and I would actually probably charge a little bit more because of the tote. I would give them the tote also with the firewood in it, so if they wanted to, they would have to restack this if they didn't have something to pick it up with already. Generally, I'd think a lot of people that have wood-burning fireplaces and stuff usually have something to move, some piece of heavy equipment to move things with, and you can just put forks under a machine and pick one of these things up and take it to wherever you need it to be at. Now another thing, one thing I wanted to mention here, whenever you split wood, do not put your thumb on top of the wood as you're splitting it. Hold the wood on the sides. And that is because if something were to shift as you're splitting this piece of firewood, what could happen is you could cut off your thumb, and that is definitely not something that you want to do. So always hold the wood and stuff when on the sides and not from the top, and you should have your fingers and stuff all intact. I know there's a friend of the family that lost a finger because of that. A log shifted and the ram came down. I guess it'd be the axe head, I guess. This black piece that's moving, and took off his thumb. So I generally try to, like I said, keep my hands well away from that splitting wedge. And see, look, I try not to hold the log on top, or I hold it right on the side. And then once it's split, generally you're usually okay, but you'd still definitely want to just keep your hands well away from that thing. But this is I've had this log splitter for probably a couple years now, and it is a huge help for splitting wood. A lot of people like to split wood by hand. I am really not one of those people. You get into a twisted and knotted piece, what do you do with that thing? Cut it with the chainsaw, and then split it, or don't even split it, just cut it into pieces big enough that it fits into the wood stove. So, I mean, you could do that, but I'd rather just split it and kind of be done with it. Now, one downside to those pieces that have all the branches and stuffs in them, like I said, they don't split very good, and they actually make a lot of crumbs, I guess I could say. They're just little pieces of wood that didn't get split, or they just broke off because, the log is all crooked and whatnot. But I don't really, I mean, it all burns, so I mean, I'm not going to be too picky about this kind of stuff, but if you want your wood piles and stuff looking really good, you might want to throw those pieces off into something else. So I'm down to, I think, 2 or 3 more logs to go. But like I said, I could not pick up these logs whatsoever. These things were incredibly heavy. Generally, the logs that are really, really heavy are still good, and they still have a lot of BTUs and stuff in them, so they're not like a rotten piece of wood that gets lighter with age, and the outside will get punky and the ends will get soft and whatnot. So, but yeah, this log splitter is really nice to have. I'm very, very happy we have this thing. The day that I was splitting this, it wasn't super cold, but it was somewhat windy, and a subscriber, I'm not going to name names, gave me this. It's like, I don't really even know exactly what it's called, but it's what I'm wearing on my head, and it goes down into your coat and keeps your head and neck warm. And you would not believe how much warmer you stay with one of these things on. I could probably eliminate wearing a hoodie now. I think I have probably a dozen hoodies, at least maybe even 15 hoodies that I wear, because in the wintertime it's just too cold on my neck to be outside, and having a hoodie is really a nice thing to have. And these things are even better because it fits closely to your head, and it definitely does keep you warmer. So I could have split these logs and stuff by hand, but that would have taken a long time, and I kind of just want to get this job done and just move on to something else. But all in all, these logs here, the ones that I'm splitting, all seem to be in pretty good shape, and them being in the IBC tote, that roof will help keep this wood dry, and it'll hopefully season over a, maybe probably 6 months or something. All this wood would be seasoned. Generally, standing ash trees, the emerald ash borer has came through and has killed pretty much every ash tree all across the United States, at least the ones that haven't been treated. And there's a lot of ash wood has flooded the market, and I wonder what they're going to do for in Major League Baseball and stuff, because I think that's what they make their bats and stuff out of. And when there's no more ash trees around, they're going to have to probably switch to another kind of wood. But we have there's at least 2, 3, 4 trees that I'd like to cut down that are ash trees after this one, and this one still has some I still have some cleanup to do on it, but it's really nice having some equipment. I remember years ago we didn't really have any farm tractors or a backhoe or didn't have a log splitter. I didn't have the Sears Suburban, and all we used to use were hydrostat mowers. And for towing and stuff, you know, really using it for some serious pulling power, you really want a gear drive transmission in a machine. Not that the hydrostats can't do it, they have to be made for doing the work that you're doing, such as like a skid steer or something. Now, I'm not using that four-way wedge on this stuff because a lot of these logs, they're not the straightest, and that four-way wedge, all it does is it just clips onto it slips over top of the wedge itself, and there's nothing that holds it on the bottom. So if you get that wedge stuck in a piece of wood, you're kind of stuck. I know Life in Farmland, if he's watching this video, he had that happen to him. He has the same wedge as I do, and he was definitely not happy about that, and I probably wouldn't be either. But I guess you could probably make a homemade wedge. I know Andrew Camerata is his name. He has a big excavating company. I think he's just a one-man show up in New York, and he built a four-way wedge for his log splitter, and that is he made a serious one, so that's pretty cool. I could probably build something like that myself. I definitely have to use a 220-volt welder to do that, and some pretty darn thick steel, but this four-way wedge works pretty good for my needs right now. Maybe in the future I might upgrade to, you know, building my own four-way wedge, but the problem with that is you can't pull the wedge out of the log if you get it stuck, because it goes past those sort of angle pieces above the wedge, and you just have to power through it, I guess. But generally what I find when I am splitting logs like this, I like to sit on another log, stand it up, and it actually, I don't know, a 14, 15, 16-inch log is a pretty good height for me. It's relatively comfortable, and you can kind of sit down and do stuff like this versus bending over, which I'll do, but you know, I don't want to do that for the whole day. I'd like to sit down and kind of be comfortable. You know, it really makes things a lot easier for splitting wood, at least. And the best way to split wood is definitely with this whole thing tilted down, so being in the horizontal position, not the vertical. And you can split wood standing up. And then I generally have the place that I'm going to be putting this wood, like this IBC tote, to this would be my left. I generally have that close to where I'm splitting with the splitter, and then I can just throw those pieces right into the bin itself, and then it kind of contains them till I can get to them, and I get, you know, a decent pile going in there, and then I'll idle down the motor to save fuel and whatnot, and then I'll just restack everything. Now, this is an overhead valve, 6.5 horsepower motor, like I said in the beginning of the video, and it sips the fuel. The flathead motors and the old Briggs motors that used to be on like the Husky log splitters and stuff, I found the overhead valve motors and stuff, they really seem to be a lot more fuel efficient, and they use way less fuel than a flathead motor does. I don't have that. There's a percentage or something out there, I don't know that off the top of my head, but they are more fuel efficient. And they're also easier to do maintenance and stuff on, because the valves they're in the motor, but you can adjust them and whatnot outside, so you just pull off the overhead valve cover, and there are your valves to do adjusting. You know, as stuff wears, you have to change the tolerances in that, because they get looser as time goes on, and then your motor will lose compression, or you know, it could do any number of things. But yeah, I really like the motor that this thing has on it. And the county line, this would be the 28-ton, I think, that Life and Farmland has. It has the exhaust pointed right towards you, and that one has a genuine Honda motor or something on it, and I really do not like that motor. I don't even know that there's a choke on it, so you kind of have to pull it a lot to get it started. So you definitely want to get a log splitter that is a horizontal shaft, that is overhead valve, and you know, versus something like those old Briggs. I'd equate them to like a push mower motor. That's what they kind of look like on there. And not that they were bad motors and stuff, but they had a primer bulb, and this one has an actual choke, which is nice, and a fuel shutoff. So I can, if I'm going to store this log splitter for a long time, what I'll do is, I did it this time here, I make sure I put the ram in the whole way, because this chrome is, you don't want it to rust or anything, and you want it to just be the whole way inside the cylinder for keeping the chrome and stuff nice. I think it keeps fluid on both sides of that, so this ram is sitting in an oil bath, and it's less likely to rust inside of the cylinder itself, being that it's a double acting cylinder. What I'll do with the fuel in this thing, the fuel that we buy these days is, I don't want to say it's not the greatest, but they're adding ethanol in, and ethanol pulls water out of the air and condenses inside of the gas tank itself, and it's not good to let that stuff sit in there. It can do a lot of havoc to the carburetors on these small engines. This is only if you don't use it a lot. If you do use it a lot, it's really not an issue. But if you let this thing sit, you know, it's not every day that I use this log splitter, but I'll turn the fuel shut off to the off position, and then I'll just run the motor out of fuel, or run the carburetor dry. And sometimes what I'll even do is I'll turn the choke on just a little bit, and that will even more try to get as much fuel out of the carburetor as possible. So hope everyone enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more, and we'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.